Town LaSalle. I know exactly where the guy who made this.
live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever. Gruesome, twosome, Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube. Good to be with you. Steve Pulaski behind the microphone with Dominic Guanzon. Joe Viso is with us in spirit. We will see Joe Viso for the last show of the year on December 30th, I believe it is, because we're off next weekend. Or we're off next week, rather. We're off next Wednesday for the Christmas holiday. Gave these boys their annual December Wednesday off. Christmas, blessed so, falls on a Saturday. So Christmas Eve is the holiday on Friday for most people. So that's exciting. And then we're going to get a whole other repeat of it because New Year's Day is on a Saturday, making New Year's Eve on a Friday. So it's a very nice way that the holidays kind of worked out this year. Dom, good to be with you tonight, man. I guess starting off with this, anything major for the holidays? What do you got going on?
No, just finally been able to put in some PTO and get it all settled. A little understaffed at work, but and you know, just puts the pressure on everyone. But it is what it is, and you know, I mean, it's like 60 degrees today. I don't know about you out there. We're not that far away from each other, but you never know. But like, yeah, it's like really nice out. Like I could go for a walk. So at least we'll be able to enjoy that. We'll see.
It got up to 70 today out here.
Jesus.
It got up to 7. It broke 70 out here. It was for a little bit. I don't know. Is it windy as hell by you? I have to ask. Is it windy out there?
It is now, and I think it was during the day. I work mostly in a basement, so I haven't had much of a chance. But yeah,
we are supposed to get, and I'm kind of nervous. We haven't gotten any warnings yet. We have a high wind warning, but we have unseasonable warmth, so it's like near 70. It's going to rain like hell tonight. It's going to rain like hell, and we are looking at 60-mile-per-hour winds. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say the T word, but these are prime conditions for one. You know, and having to do the weather hourly on my show, like, I mean, not even hourly, quarterly on my show at the radio. I've been made hyper aware of weather these last several years. So I like sense this. I'm starting to be like the old man. I'm like, I wake up, my elbow's hurting, and I feel tornadic activity coming on. But anyway, missing Joe tonight. He's with us in spirit. We will see him again on the 30th of December, though. Again, like I said, we are off next week. And on the 30th of December, we are coming with a big show to wrap up the final show of the year. We have got Spider-Man Far From Home on deck. That's going to be the big review. And we also got The Matrix 4. And I just rewatched all 3 of the Matrix movies over the last like 5 days or so. I just rewatched all of those. And now I'm convinced nothing is real. I rewatched all of them. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? The one flaw of this whole thing is that I wonder, I'm like, okay, well, if the Matrix, I'm like, nothing is real. But if the Matrix, how can the Matrix be real when my eyes aren't real? I spent way too much time thinking about that throughout rewatching these movies, though. So I recommend if you have extra time in your travels with your PTO and stuff, revisit the Matrix movies. 2 of them are good. The first one, and not to go long-winded on this, but they're just fresh in my mind. And I'll bring this up again in 2 weeks when we review the Matrix Resurrections. But like, the thing with the first Matrix is I think you could re-release that movie now with very little changes and it would still look great and fit the time. That's how well that thing is aged.
Yeah, a lot of I like looking into various trades and you know, disciplines just to kind of surface level and just be interested. And one of them is VFX work for movies, or just in general VFX work. And they're like, every Matrix movie has pushed the envelope of incredible CGI, movie level, feature level CGI in so many interesting ways that it's honestly like underappreciated in that specific aspect. The first one in particular, but 2 and 3 as well.
Yeah, 2 and 3, the CGI work is not as exceptional. There are some parts of it that don't look as good, but uniformly, these movies are visually very good. I mean, to put it mildly, especially the first one. So it was fun to review those. I always forget though which one came first. Like I had to keep reminding myself it was Reloaded, Revolutions, and then Resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
I can't because I hate when movie sequels are not numbered, and it's even worse when they use like three of the most cliche subtitles too: Reloaded, Resurrections.
It was the 2000s.
Like I hate that crap. Like the sequel, I could go onto a whole Sleepless rant, and if we were still on the radio show, I probably would have done it by now, given all the time we had to fill. I hate sequel numbering. It's the worst. Some of these franchises are miserable.
I'm sure you love Rambo, but
Rambo's one of the worst. Halloween sucks too.
Yeah.
You know,
Halloween sucks. Was that an installment?
No, that's the third one coming out. No, Halloween sucks too, because it's like the more sequels you make, the more necessary it is to goddamn number them.
Right.
But then they just inexplicably stopped after the fifth one. And then they just did like the curse of Michael Myers, the revenge of Michael Myers. And it's like, unless you have prior knowledge or have done your research, you're never going to figure out which one of these came first. And it's even worse when they pull a Fast and the Furious and they call the fourth one Fast and Furious. It's like, okay, we're just removing articles. It's like they get to a point they're embarrassed they made so many. I mean, could go on.
Credit where credit is due for Fast and Furious. Once they got to 5, they've actually kept a number somewhere in the title somehow, like Fate of the Furious. We're like, okay, sure, but at least there's an 8 in there. You really crammed it in. But last thing I guess I'll say on this was South Park did a thing where like for a whole season they literally just added 2000 to. I think it was like the 1999 season.
They did, yeah.
They just added like 2000 to the end of episode title without working around it. So it was like. I don't even know the episode titles, but like Stan goes to the dentist. Or there's 2000.
Quintuplets 2000.
Yeah,
exactly. I think was one. My favorite South Park title, and then we'll get into West Side Story because the West Side Story is really our only topic today. So that's why we can, go along with the prologue here. But the other thing I'll mention too is my favorite title, my favorite South Park title. And he's making fun of my God over here, but I don't even care. Roger Ebert criticized Orgasmo, Trey Parker and Matt Stone's movie, which I believe was pre-South Park, or at least at the very beginning of South Park. He gave that movie like half a star, and it was one of the worst movies he said of the decade. And the next episode of the following season of South Park, Roger Ebert had no appearance in the episode. He wasn't even so much as mentioned. The title of the episode was just Roger Ebert should lay off the fatty foods.
Nothing to do with Roger Ebert.
Nothing. I remember even as a kid when I was watching South Park, way too young, like, where's Ebert in this episode? He is nowhere to be found. He's nowhere to be found. That's a lie. He's actually right here sitting by me, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, though, we are talking West Side Story, and I know this topic is close to home with Dominic because I remember even back in the radio days and the college days, Dom, I remember you talked a couple of times about West Side Story. I know it's one of your all-time favorite musicals, maybe your favorite musical. I'll let you do more of the talking on that. Our primary focus, though, is obviously the remake, which just came out, the Steven Spielberg remake. At 74 years old, I can't get over this, and I've been telling everybody at work who's already annoyed with me. I've been telling everybody at work, I'm like, did you know this is Steven Spielberg's first ever musical? And they all have the same reaction. Really? I guess you're right.
Yep. It's a surprise to everyone.
It's his first ever musical. And the takeaway that I thought, and I swear I didn't put this in I put this in my review, but I said, like, after watching this, you would think that he was like a primary musical director. That's how good this is. And it shouldn't come as a shock. I'm not going to lie. I should have put this in my review. I wasn't skeptical going to this movie, but I also, musicals have not been the strongest this year outside of In the Heights. Mm-hmm. Musicals have not been the strongest this year. I was not as high on Tick, Tick, Boom as you were, or the masses were. But, and I ain't even going to talk about the other one that came out in September. I already forgot it. But anyway, when I sat down to watch this movie in the theater, I was thinking to myself, I was like, all right, Spielberg, you better show me something here. Like, you haven't done a movie. Bless me. Thank me. You haven't done a movie in like 4 years and you're doing your first musical. Spielberg, you better show me something. And then the credits roll 2.5 hours later. And I got like I'm not gonna lie, little tears. I'm not gonna lie, a little couple tears. A couple tears with this movie. And I just go, damn it, Steven. You did it again, didn't you? You just had to find another forte and bodied it once again, because that's what he does. He does more than update West Side Story. He brings a new vision, a new vision with minor but respectful changes that ultimately contribute to what I say is a superior movie to the 1961 musical, in a couple of significant ways. And I'll touch more on the 61 musical. I really want to get your thoughts, though, Dom. Talk about your background, because I know West Side Story absolutely means a lot to you, and your general thoughts just to prelude into talking about Spielberg's remake.
Yeah, so the 1961 West Side Story is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's like a three-way tie between my favorite musical. It's just hard to pick in there between Singing in the Rain, West Side Story, and Jesus Christ Superstar, and they're all just different musicals. So it's like any given day of the week, the answer will change. It will flip between those three. But I think two of them are Sondheim joints. So I'm sorry, yes. No, Tim Rice. I'm sorry, Jesus Christ Superstar did Tim Rice. So my bad. But still, yeah, dude, West Side Story is such an incredible piece of work, often cited as one of the greatest films ever made, and certainly one of the greatest, often like one or two top spot for greatest movie musical. And just the way that this story grows younger, because the tagline in a lot of the trailers at the time for the 61 movie and poster taglines was, unlike other musicals, West Side Story grows younger. And Steven Spielberg absolutely rings true on that. Here we are in 2021, and a lot of the themes are it's like it never aged whatsoever. It's like stuck in stasis, which is a very depressing thing. In talking about how the state of our world, but still, yeah, dude, the 61 West Side Story is just a landmark achievement in cinema and musicals. In general, and just seeing Natalie Wood on screen, just gorgeous woman on screen, combined with Rita Moreno, just one of the spiciest performances. It won her the Oscar, rightfully so. I don't even know like who she was competing against, but like they had no shot against Rita Moreno's character there, performance there, and just the music and the dancing. Going into this Spielberg one, I had a lot of, thoughts and emotions, trying to temper them as best as I can. I was low-key hyped for this. I try to fight hype as much as I can, but there's just that inherent nostalgia thing. So it's like, all right, I'm going to have my nostalgia blinders on here. It is what it is. But one of the things I was looking for with this new one was, okay, will this still have the societal impact that it did? Well, and will Steven Spielberg capitalize on that in a not a heavy-handed manner, right? But ring true while still adding something fresh. Because I think you mentioned this in your written review, Steve. West Side Story 1961 was freaking woke for its time, and I know woke is a very sarcastic term these days, but it's very progressive for its time. It's like, God damn, really? I know the 60s were a crazy time, but even then, for mainstream America, West Side Story is very radical. And I know it was a 50s Broadway musical first, but still putting it at the screen for the mass audience and it receiving the critical acclaim, roundly so, by so much of the public, was really fascinating to see. And I could gush about this movie. I could go frame by frame, but I'll just say, yeah, West Side Story. My heart is definitely in that movie.
The only thing more enjoyable than watching it, I think, is reading about it, the original, because, you read about the story of Jerome Robbins, yeah, who's the co-director of the movie, but was fired mid-production. And he is the one who did the choreography on that movie. And the choreography was famously, notoriously rigorous. And to the point where, like, even dancers and actors were saying, like when work on background people and stuff were saying, never before and never again did I work on something so damn laborious that was like constant. I mean, and the thing is, they had the actors, actually, it was a totally different time, but they had the actors, like the scene when the Jets jumped the chain link fence.
Yeah.
The actors did that. And then think about, they had to scale the fence, land in the playground, and on top of timing it with the music. Lord only knows how many takes it took. And Roger Ebert wrote an excellent review of West Side Story 61. And he said too, he's like, that's a job for stuntmen, not actors, not performers, especially when they have to bolt across and then break out into song and dance.
These are the six. We'll get to the new one, but the 61 West Side Story. Those are the like hard trained dancers. Like they're doing somersaults and shit, you know, and like hard dancing. And Jerome Robbins, I mean, I don't know. Dancing is not one of the disciplines I have that much, insight into, but from what I've read about him, he's like an extremely influential choreographer just in the world of dance, apparently. And it absolutely shows here, because apparently I think one nickname I read about this production was like the production of 1,000 bandages or something. Like they were getting like hurt on this thing.
Oh God. Man.
That gym scene is like, it's spectacular. That's like my favorite scene in the whole movie, which is really saying something, but it looks brutal, and because it was.
You can tell you can tell that this was an arduous shoot from top to bottom, and the context too of watching it, because I watched it last week before I saw this new one. I felt like I had to, even because I never even reviewed it, but I even mentioned in my review too. I said, like, watching this thing is like viewing it now as opposed to viewing it in like 61, like viewing it now with decades of context, it really felt like the dying breath of old Hollywood in a lot of ways too. Like how old Hollywood clinging on for dear life. And this was the time too in the 60s when you had a lot of radical changes and new voices coming into cinema. Much more too, you had such a global influence. The year prior, I believe, was when Jean-Luc Godard released Breathless and French New Wave kicked off. You had so many different, and cinema was becoming globalized to the point where it was also becoming accessible in some aspects in America through ways of art house theaters. That's when they started popping up. So there was a lot more competing forces. It wasn't just the titan of Hollywood. So like you see, they dug into everything from like the brown face to like Technicolor to everything. They dug into like all those standard things that you recall from, that are very synonymous to old Hollywood productions. You have very classic actors like Natalie Wood. You have Robert Wise, who was an editor, I believe, I think he was the editor of Citizen Kane. So you had like an old Hollywood veteran in it too. And then you had songs written by, arguably, you could absolutely make the argument, the greatest lyricist of all time, Stephen Sondheim. You can absolutely make that argument. So this is lofty. And I mean, like, first and foremost, there really was no grounds, not that I was really, but like, if there's any filmmaker that's earned implicit trust, it's Steven Spielberg. If there's any filmmaker that, like, I don't worry about going to see one of his movies and worrying that he's going to botch it, that he's on a short list. He's on an extremely short list. He's an obvious godfather of cinema. If Hollywood had and I still can't believe they don't, if Hollywood had a Hall of Fame, I know they have the Walk of Fame, but
that's pretty much the equivalent. Yeah.
That, many people get stars. I mean, I'm talking like Gold Jacket, like, you cannot write the history of cinema without mentioning Steven Spielberg.
The worst thing you can fear from a Spielberg film is that it's too Spielberg. And it's like, well, okay, how did he get that reputation in the first place? Because he made damn good movies. So
yeah, exactly. And there's even like, I went back and I'm going to do a Spielberg Appreciation Month next year, because I'm going to watch like 15 movies that I have. There's about 15 movies by him I have not seen. Not maybe about 10. There's a couple I'm going to rewatch too. But like, Spielberg, don't think has made a bad movie. I was really perusing his filmography. He's made movies I'm not as high on. Like I was looking through his filmography, and I think I said if I had to pick the worst thing he's made, I would probably say The Post.
Yeah,
but
I
even
was just
The
thinking
Post
that.
is very good. Even The Post is good.
I don't know his full filmography. I don't think I think I saw the one where he's like his first one where the character is being chased by a truck. But Duel, yeah, I think I need to watch that again. But
Duel's great.
Yeah, The Post, and it's funny because I just love like it's hard newspaper politics and stuff like that. But like it's so goddamn corny. But I just love it. I still love it. Like
you can't say it's poorly acted and poorly shot.
No,
the
you
only
can't.
thing you can really say is that it's
corny.
overwrought. It's overwrought.
It's overwrought. That's probably the best.
And it didn't help. It didn't help that 2 years prior, Spotlight came out and did it much better.
That's very
true.
True.
Spotlight nailed it from a filmmaking aspect and a journalistic aspect. That was the nice thing about Spotlight. But like, even I look at some of Spielberg's movies, I love, and apparently this is one that ends up on a lot of people's worst list. I love The Terminal with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, hell yeah. Terminal's
That's
great.
a great movie. They built that whole airport. They built that whole ass airport.
I didn't even know that.
They built that whole that airport's a soundstage.
Wow.
They erected that whole thing. I love The Terminal, and I hate a sportscaster I like just bashed that movie a couple of weeks ago, and it pissed me off. But like,
what were they expecting with The Terminal? Like,
it's a great movie, man. First off, it's a great premise. It's just a really good stuck in a setting premise. I also like, it's one of my also favorite action films by Spielberg too, that gets no love. It's probably more popular in England than it is in America. It really never had a prayer to take off in America. I love The Adventures of Tintin because I grew up reading those books. And
that's the animated one, right?
It's motion capture.
Motion captured.
That movie was sweet. That, as a Tintin fan growing up, that thing was awesome. I'm so glad we didn't get like a botched animation version. Spielberg just waited and made it, and it was chef's kiss brilliant.
A lot of VFX in the world of VFX that I like observing every now and then. They always every now and then they mention Tintin, and it's like, damn, I should watch this movie.
It's so good. I mean, there's a handful though I haven't seen. I never saw War Horse. I never watched that one. And a lot of people love
clips from War Horse on YouTube.
I've seen clips from War Horse too, and I think that's my boss's favorite movie too. Truth be told, sure. War Horse I never saw. Empire of the Sun I never saw. There's a lot. I want to watch some of his more low key ones too. But we'll talk West Side Story though. That's obviously the reason for the season over here. It's hard to know where to start because this is such a big movie, but I just want to say that like there are at least 3 star-making performances in this thing. And the 3 that I would mention, I don't think you can really go wrong with anybody here. I think everybody gives at least a good performance, and that includes the eminently controversial Ansel Elgort. There too. Even though I will say he is probably the weakest of the whole crop. By virtue of how his character is written and a couple other things. I thought Rachel Zegler was downright phenomenal. And I guess she's a YouTube personality. I'm just old. I've just never heard of her.
Really?
I never heard of her. No. Have you?
No.
She's a YouTuber. I didn't look too deep into
when people
it.
Say when people say when people say YouTube personality. Okay, I guess she is. Okay. Because the mainstream media might be like, oh yeah, they've got a YouTube channel, so therefore they are a YouTube. Like Will Smith is a YouTuber.
She's popular. Like I was probably the last to really discover her
she
of
is.
Like our age group.
Yeah, she does vlogs. It looks like okay, cool.
She plays Maria, I think, super affectionately. I think super well. You have Mike Faced as Riff, who's really good.
I freaking love Riff in this movie. Holy shit,
he's so good. He is just he's just the right blend of braggadocious and cocky and arrogant and hard-headed. Smug. I loved it. He was really good. And then I'd also say too, Alvarez is very good too. I would also say though, I'd probably above Alvarez, I would probably say Ariana DeBois.
Yes.
As the other one, as Maria's sister.
Anita.
Anita. Yeah, I blanked on that.
Not sister, but
no. Bernardo's partner. Excuse me. Yes. She is very good. And like the emotional beat like, and it was what got Rita Moreno the Oscar in 61 too, is that climactic. It's after the climax that, or not after the climax. It's like, there's like two climaxes in this movie.
I know what you
but
mean.
it's like, you know what I mean? It's when she talks to, is when Anita has to talk to Maria one-on-one after something devastating has happened. Like that got Marino the Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
That absolutely got her the Oscar. And the boys nails that whole scene, the song, everything.
When I saw
the acting here is uniformly great.
When I saw her in Ariana DeBose in Hamilton, because she was in the Hamilton cast as the Bullet, aptly named so because she shows a lot of the bullets showing in the show. But she does a fantastic job in terms of her choreography. I'd say when I saw her on the cast, I was like, okay, this movie is going to be something else because she can dance. She is actual Broadway. Can actually sing. With this whole cast, when I saw Ansel Elgort, I was like, oh no, okay. It's not a bad sign, but I was like, okay, are they just choosing people because they're like, did they just see him on Baby Driver and he's a good looking guy? Apparently he can sing because like that's him. It's like, yeah, he can hit the notes. But then I saw the rest of the cast. Like, oh, okay, cool. Ariana DeBose, David Alvarez. Okay, these are actual like Broadway trained people. Like they know what they're doing.
And he's kind of swallowed up by the wealth of talent and more experienced talent, at least in musical realm, in the musical Broadway realm, than he himself is. I liked him, and I know that, like I said, I don't want to get into it. I know he's a controversial. I mean, it's not like Elgort. Yeah, I know with the allegations.
That's some fresh stuff. I don't even want to touch. I don't
know.
No,
the thing is though, is like so that's a hotbed, and I feel like people don't like. As bad as that is, people are reluctant or they're just very hard on him with this.
Let me say
I think he's good. I think he's good. I don't think he conveys the stakes of Tony real well, but I think he's good. I think I was not offended by his performance here.
Yeah, no, he does the job sufficiently and pretty well. Yeah, it's not bad at all. I think it's just a problem I have with, and by problem I mean just critiques, but like Ansel Elgort has a face that it's either you act big or you act subtle, and you can do both. But I can tell Elgort tries to do subtle, but I don't know if it actually translates to, I don't know if I'm getting that communique. It's like I don't know if I'm getting this 100%. It's very subtle. Then there is the scene where he gets a big piece of, I'm going to try and not spoil it, I guess, but he gets a big piece of news and then he like freaks out. I was like, oh, okay, you can open your eyes bigger than like just woke up or whatever. Anyway, but but no, he did perfectly fine and he hit those notes. I was impressed. Like these are
he's a damn good singer. These are not easy songs to sing. He's a damn good singer.
Something's coming is like there's a high note at the very end. It's like, oh, he hit that. Okay, good work. There you go.
Yeah, he does a really good job with the vocals. And then Rita Moreno, one of the best changes in this movie too is really the absence of Doc. The shop owner is replaced by Valentina, played by Rita Moreno, who again played Anita and won the Oscar. One of 10 Oscars this movie won back in 60, I think it was 62 then the following year. But she's in it and she replaces Doc. And I did not realize until this scene happens. And again, it's a famous scene in the original and it's done here. I don't think it's a spoiler necessarily. It's the near rape scene of Anita.
Right.
And I didn't realize it until it was coming, that it recontextualizes it because Valentina is the one to break it up, not Doc. And granted, it's a different culture. We're in the Me Too, post Me Too culture, but for the one of the attacks on movies nowadays, and I understand it, is like they're very hyper current and they come with like some sort of an agenda. That scene was handled exquisitely. And you don't realize the gender, switch and how it's going to play into it. Really, I didn't think about it until it happened.
Yeah, me neither.
And then I'm like, oh, this is going to be big. And she nails it. And it's a resounding triumph of a scene. I don't want to ruin her line because Doc's line in the original was good about how you boys are what make this world lousy. and the way he says it. I don't want to ruin Valentina's line here, what she says to the boys afterwards, but it is marvelously delivered by it. I mean, this is the kind of performance from her too that might get her the Oscar again for another role.
Could you imagine?
And granted, there's a lot that has to kind of fall into place for that to happen. I don't see it out of the realm of possibility. And that is a footnote in history. The same actress gets an Oscar nomination for the same movie in two completely different roles, 50 years apart? You know, like it would be insane, but it would also be arguably deserved.
Rita Moreno showing up in this movie, I was nervous about. There's a lot of things I was nervous about just because I love the original so much. But Rita Moreno, I was nervous about particularly because are they going to do like some cameo thing? And it's like, oh, hey, we paid our dues. No, I looked more into it after watching. It's like, Spielberg called her up and it's like, hey, we don't want to just do a cameo. We want to make this a real role. We're going to have you replace Doc, or essentially fill the Doc role. And I was overjoyed. I words cannot fathom just how overjoyed I am to see Rita Moreno's performance in this, and the way her character is written, and the way her role is in this movie, because it's a loving tribute to the original. It honors the original. As you said, it recontextualizes so many scenes. Her role, her story in this one is that she married Doc, who is still a white guy in this story, in this universe. So she's actually like a bridge between the two cultures, the white culture and the Puerto Rican cultures. And that's not even a reconciliatory thing. It's like, at one point she's like, yeah, she's a gringa, she's a traitor. And it's like, God damn, that adds so much depth to this role, where the Doc role is just supposed to be, it mirrors Romeo and Juliet, like this whole story does, but it just mirrors that role, kind of like the, I forget the name of the character in the original Shakespeare one, but it kind of just mirrors that role functionally. But just having Rita Moreno here, in that specific character and role it's such a breath of fresh air, probably the biggest breath of fresh air in this movie, and it's done so beautifully. So I really can't put it into words. I will say that she still got it. She never lost it. She still got it, man. Holy hell.
And she's an executive producer on this.
She's an executive producer, and like just another level of honoring her in this movie. She sings the song Somewhere, which is another recontextualized thing, because in the original, and I believe in Broadway and every stage production, Somewhere is sung between the two lovers, the Tony and Maria, decrying how they're not going to get their love now, but they'll get it somewhere. And here, Rita Moreno sings it, or Valentina sings it, kind of like lamenting society as a whole, lamenting her neighborhood, lamenting these kids, and lamenting her, while also remembering her late husband, the original Doc. And it's such a god damn. I'm so happy about Rita Moreno in this movie that I like. Oh, it overjoys me.
Yeah, it's really good. She's such a good performer in here. I'm not going to say many, because there's a few, but that's one of the few changes to this whole thing. And what I also loved, and I think that it would be a crime if they didn't do this, but I think it would also be a crime if they didn't do it so well, is that the movie, the ultimate difference, I think, with this movie and why it's better than the original is that, and I thought I was going to be the only critic to make that claim. Thank God I'm not. But the other thing is that it does what the 1961 movie couldn't do. And that is really humanize the Puerto Rican sharks.
Yes.
And on top of the fact that they actually cast Latino actors and actresses in this. Number one.
Natalie Wood is Russian, by the way.
Just number one. Number two, though, is that it gives light to the immigrant experience. And which is a big part of the original West Side Story. I can't speak for the Broadway show. I never saw it, but it's a big part of the movie but there's always the imbalance in the original of the Sharks and the Jets. And you can't hold it too much against the movie because of the time. But it's all, I mean, on top of the fact that at times in the original, I found it difficult to tell the Sharks and Jets apart for makeup reasons, because the Jets are never like ethnically concretized either, as like they're Polish or they're Russians or whatever. They're never like ethnic, as they're not as ethnically concretized as the Puerto Ricans. Where in this one, though, it gives a lot of weight and life and value to the immigrant experience, especially visually, which I'll touch on in a moment.
I'll do you one better. I think Spielberg manages to contextualize or better like do justice to both gangs. Even obviously the Puerto Ricans, as you said, just even giving them an extra song, which is them doing like a group song in the very beginning, just like a minute of them singing, just in the face of the cops. I was like, damn, that's fucking that's badass. That was
good. That whole opening was really strong.
Yeah, 100%. But even the Jets as well, the white kids, where it's like, oh, okay, like they kind of imply it subtly in the background in the original, but here it's like, no, we're gonna let you know, like, yeah, in the 50s, New York, we were just like throwing poor people under the bus, and like just gentrification's a hot new word now seemingly, but no, we were doing that shit in the 50s. Like, yeah, Lincoln Center, the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts, yeah, that was all like, that's where working class people lived, and like we just drove them away not for public housing, but just for this fancy whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, that actually makes sense as to why these two gangs are actually fighting over what little territory, shrinking territory that they have. I think they even throw in an extra line there from the cops where it's like, or no, I don't know, maybe one of the Jets say it where it's like, yeah, you know, you Puerto Ricans, you got it tough, but you know, at least you got family. You're tight knit. You got a tight knit community. That community is under attack, but at least you got it. You know, here, you know, it's like we're all like orphans, and like our parents are drunks and druggies and stuff, or criminals. You know, uncle's doing 15 years on Rikers or some shit like that, and it's like, goddamn, yeah, you're right. they do benefit from being white, but they're still like poor and abused by the system, which is the whole point of the Officer Krupke song. But they accentuate it there too. Even just like the first shot of the movie is them like, hey, yeah, this is like all gonna be torn down, and like just a massive, I think a drone shot of that might be Spielberg's first drone shot. I don't know, but of like, hey, here's the massive slums that this whole thing takes place in, and why it's a slum in the first place. Just that alone, it's like just a little tidbit of extra backstory that isn't too heavy-handed. You know, I think even Tony gets some extra backstory too, but it worked. Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner, the screenwriter here, manages to really bake it in very subtly, as opposed to like, hey, we're gonna go back to Puerto Rico and see them get on the boat. It's like, no, we don't need to do that. Let's just make it subtle.
It's a here and now thing. And I mean, this movie was really made by a crop of cinematic of people who are fluent geniuses in the language of cinema. I mean, on top of Spielberg, Kushner devises an excellent screenplay, a balanced screenplay, a very humanizing screenplay. You have Josh, what's his name? I want to get his name right too. Justin Peck, excuse me. I always want to say Josh Peck. Justin Peck as the as the choreographer here, who does exceptional work. And then you have Janusz Kaminski, Spielberg's right-hand cinematographer, did Schindler's List and litany of other Spielberg movies. Kaminski even heightens it, where Kushner nails the writing of humanizing both the Sharks and the Jets. I agree with your point too. What Kushner's writing is balanced beautifully by Kaminski's cinematography insofar of the visual language of the movie. And I'll give a good example too, is that you have the setting is this crumbling infrastructure that's pervasive. You have cranes and construction. The city's in disarray. It's being torn down. It's being rebuilt. The groups are being nudged out. The cops are pricks, like everything. And you have these young people whose lives are broken, not irreparably, but they're very broken. They are starting, you know, like you talk about, like, you know, certain political groups love to say that we all start at the same starting point. These guys don't even have tickets to the arena. No. Okay. They don't even have tickets to the damn arena. They're not even in the parking lot. But like the visuals of this, like setting them against the backdrop, because there's some scenes where these like crumbling buildings or these cranes that are either tearing down or building are in the background, towering over the characters. The symbology of this movie too, in a visual sense, is gorgeous, and it's handled extremely well, and it comes as really no surprise. It really shouldn't, because Kaminsky's one of the best cinematographers working today. Spielberg's one of the best directors working today, but they knock it out of the park again. That's the thing. I never get tired of seeing like a home run. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can go to a million baseball games, you never get tired of seeing a home run. You know, like, it's the same thing here, where they kill it and they give it another layer of like that was present in the 61 version, but I think the visual poetry here is so damn strong throughout.
I love something that Spielberg, or at least his collaborators too, have been nailing in the past, like his past movies, even like his American History trilogy, starting with Lincoln, right? I call that Lincoln. I forget the middle one in The Post. Crap. But anyway, he has a specific look that he employs in all his movies that is, it's like glossy almost, but not to the point of like, hey, why did you make this glossy? It's more like it's like a memory. Like, you're looking back on this time. It's authentic, but it also has this extra zhuzh to it that is really, really cool. It's like almost like honoring it to a degree. And the way that this movie, this West Side Story in particular, plays with lights, a lot of not like annoying lens flare from what's his name, the guy who did the new Star Wars and stuff like that.
J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, it's not like annoying lens flare like that, but it's
not
like,
to interrupt you, but you were either thinking of Bridge of Spies,
or I was thinking of Bridge of Spies.
I was gonna say, I'm like, he's not thinking of Ready Player One. It's got to be Bridge of Spies.
Yeah, the American History.
I was hoping you were going to even throw me a curveball. I was hoping you were going to tell me you were thinking of the BFG.
BFG? No, I'm okay. Yeah, Lincoln, Ready Player One, and The Post. That perfect trilogy of American history. No, but
BFG gang, baby.
Yeah, dude, there's a certain glossiness here. And usually when you say glossy, it's usually a negative. But no, here it puts it into like a semi-dream state. And usually when you think dreamy, you usually think like very soft edges, you know, very kind of like a very faded or fuzzy in a way, in a very warm kind of way. No, this kind of dreamlike is very like bright, very stark edges and very colorful. And it's so fun to look at. Honestly, like if you had told me that Lin-Manuel Miranda had a say in this somehow, or that his production company had a say in this somehow, I'd believe you. Not just for the themes of Puerto Ricans in New York dancing in the streets, but just in the look alone, it's so beautiful. Even like in certain, like the battle scenes in Lincoln, have that same kind of quality to it. That is real. It's surreal, but still very grounded. And it's like looking at a candy store. I don't know how to say it. Regardless, I just want to shout out to the beautiful look of this movie. That's probably owed to the cinematographer, but also the colorists as well here. It's great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie. Before we give our final star ratings too, because we do want to touch on the box office performance of this movie, and we're really going to switch gears and tone for this because I'm yet again pissed at America. But I want to ask you. I'll give mine too. You could probably maybe even guess mine. I think I mentioned it in my review, which you can read at stevepulaski.com. What's your favorite number in the original, and what's your favorite number here?
I hate you.
You don't have to say the original, but like here, at least, since we're talking about the new one, like okay, what was the number? What was your favorite? There's a lot of them here.
Yeah, I can answer that. The original Mambo is one of the greatest musical from 61. The original Mambo is one of the greatest dance sequences in cinema cinema history. Hands down, one of the greatest. I would argue the greatest, but easily top 10. I think I don't if there's a group of Broadway and cinema historians, they would say consistently Mambo in every sense. In the new one, I might That's really hard to say. I'm actually gonna say cool, just because that's probably the biggest departure here, is that cool is completely recontextualized. Um, in the it's put at a different place. It's done by different characters. And it has a different meaning behind it that I really appreciate. It's a much more intimate dance number too, because it's very character driven. In the original, cool is done after the characters die. Just like, hey, let's just calm down because the cops are going to be on us, and then the Jets just do cool. In this new one, I guess I don't want to spoil it, but in this new one, it's very character driven, and it's like, hey, this is accentuating that this character cares about this one, this character is desperate, et cetera, and it gives it a whole new meaning. But behind that, I could easily say Somewhere by Valentina here, because it's just brand new, and it's so refreshing.
Somewhere by Valentina comes very close for me. I think so. I mean, if you want to say best, I probably would say Somewhere by Valentina. If you want to say best, like in terms of best, the time it comes in the movie, the message of the song, Moreno's performance, like you want to go that way, I will. The one that entertained me the most and the one I will certainly replay is going to be G Officer Krupke. Because I love that. Good. I love that song. And I love what they did to it. I love it in the original too. The original is good. The original, it takes place on the street. When they do the song, the Jets perform that song. And I kept wondering throughout the first like hour or so, I'm like, I wonder how they're going to do the Krupke, how they're going to do Officer Krupke in this one. And they're in like the booking room of the police station. And it takes on a whole new context too, because they are in the very institution that is helping suppress them.
It's really,
and that thunderous finale when the typical Krupp you, when the line you're expecting, Krupp you, the way that hits, because they're doing it mainly in abstract in the original, where in here they are right in the heat, they're belly in the actual institution. They're in the belly of the beast, so to speak. I clapped. I was in a theater of there's about 20 people in the theater. It was a good crowd on a Saturday afternoon. I clapped after it. It was, I was struck by that. That was one of those instances where I was like, I was happy. I saw it in the Heights in the theaters when it came out. And I was happy because I could go back home on HBO Max. Number one, make my mother watch it. And number two, go back and play certain scenes. I was so pissed when I got out thinking, I was like, I want to see that G Officer Krupke one more time. Like, it was marvelous. Somewhere too, I would love to see again.
Officer Krupke. I could do a breakdown of every single song in this musical, but Officer Krupke is a really important one because it's the most society driven one. Actually, I take that back. That might be America. But for the Jets, for the Sharks, it's America. For the Jets, it's Officer Krupke, and
that's why I like it a lot.
Exactly,
because it's sociological.
100%, and
so is America.
With Officer, like fun fact, I'll throw in this tidbit while we remember Stephen Sondheim. What a beautiful industry-wide like celebration of Stephen Sondheim, inadvertently celebrating Stephen Sondheim. Like he could not have picked a better year to like kick the bucket and like, hey, you're gonna be in a scene in Tick Tick Boom, and we're gonna celebrate your first work. Like, Jesus Christ.
And let's not pretend like his fingerprints aren't on In the Heights.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like even that too.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. This is a banner year for Sondheim, to say the very least, because he's so memorialized very thoughtfully in Tick Tick Boom. You can feel his influence.
He's a character. He's straight up a character.
Yeah, you could feel it. And I mean, on top of that, his influence marinating throughout the whole movie. And then you have this, obviously. No, this is a banner year. This is a banner year for Sondheim loyalists.
Fun fact, Officer Krupke, when Sondheim wrote that, he did want to put in the FU at the end of that song.
Yeah.
But he wanted to break that barrier in Broadway, but he decided against it. I think there was some pressure either from Bernstein or someone else. Like, all right, fine, I'll relent. I got to find a different way to end this. And he came up with Officer Krupke, Krupp you. And he was like, you know what? He later went on the record saying, this is my favorite. This is probably the favorite lyric I've ever written, because it was born out of necessity. And it's like, G Officer Krupke, Krupp you. That's a stroke of genius. And I agree. Like that's awesome. That's a great story.
And you think, and it's so corny. Like if you're reading it or you just say it to somebody who's unfamiliar with West Side Story, it's going to come off as tacky. But what precedes it is 5 minutes of nothing but rage that attacks every cranny of society.
You don't
and
need
makes
the
an
FU.
argument for everything.
You don't
really need it.
Yeah.
You don't need it. And at the end, it's just a mic drop. And then just the way, I don't want to ruin how it ends in the booking room in the new one, how the song sets up. But it's so good. And there's better props because they're in the police station too.
Mm-hmm.
There's better props that they can utilize as well, as opposed to being on the street and on the stoop. Like, just a masterful scene. Just when I thought handedly In the Heights, the opening, the first 8 minutes of In the Heights was going to be my favorite musical number of the year. And damn, Officer Krupke is a close second for my favorite of the year. And that just goes to show you, it has been a remarkable year for musicals if this country would pay attention.
100%. We're going to go into ratings, right?
You go first.
Yeah, 4 out of 4. Easy for me. This is in so many aspects, it honors the original. It does justice to the original. It expands on the original in so many subtle, not heavy-handed ways. For not just for the Puerto Ricans as a whole, but for specific characters like anybody's. It's like, hey, you threw in like it was like very easily added to the character of anybody's, which is in the original a tomboy. In this new one, it's like, oh no, this person is probably trans. Like 100%. Like that's probably what it would be in real life. Like, that just even,
and they couldn't really say that in the original either.
Well, they didn't. They probably didn't even know what that was right at the time. Probably, I don't know. But the Jets as well. They get expansions. Tony gets a backstory. Like, he like did time, and he like there were other gangs that they were beating up on too. And it's this, what a beautiful celebration of the original, of Sondheim, of Rita Moreno, of Spielberg's work as a whole. My God, I hope he does another musical, because I want to see what he does with a not as a musical where the groundwork may not be so laid out. I want to give Dear Evan Hansen to Steven Spielberg. I want to see what he does with it. No, I'm kidding.
No, we probably got, if we're lucky, 20 more years with Spielberg, maybe 12 more with him directing feature projects like this. No, I would love to see another musical from him. I really would. Like you said, one with significantly less fanfare. Because right now, you've conquered the mountain in terms of like taking the arguable granddaddy of the genre, and remaking it. Like, this is the rare, in my opinion. I don't put these two words together for obvious reasons. This is the rare elite remake, where it does everything you could possibly want. In terms, like you just said, I'm a piggyback off of you, honoring the original, but not being beholden to the tradition of the original too. And when it does make changes, it makes logical changes. It doesn't make changes to appease certain groups. It makes changes for the betterment of the characters and the betterment of the production and the piece itself. That's like very respectful.
Not appease, for the betterment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does. I give it 3.5 out of 4 stars. I loved it. I'm going to watch it again. And it's a good seg into this topic too, because I'm really hoping this thing has some legs over the holidays, because I'm thinking about, Spider-Man's going to crush everything.
Oh yeah.
Spider-Man's going to hog everything. But outside of that, you have it's not really a banner year for Christmas this year. You have like Sing 2's coming out. I can't wait for Licorice Pizza. Personally, that's the one I'm excited for. American Underdog's not really going to do too much damage, I don't think, at the box office. Really, I think that's going to be another one that's going to do really well on streaming. It might do better than expected. But some disheartening news with the state of musicals in the box office. We'll take the last 10 minutes or so of the show and touch on this. West Side Story opened this weekend, obviously, and it collected only $10.5 million in its domestic debut. And that makes it an extremely uphill battle for this thing to even break even, let alone be profitable. It's budgeted at $100 million. And the only thing that I think is reassuring about this is that Spielberg is so Teflon. BFG is one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. That movie made no money. And he still made 3 movies after that?
Well, it's Spielberg, right? This
It's not going to tank his career by any stretch of the imagination.
He can just do whatever he wants now. He has the clout. People will probably work for him for free. They shouldn't, but they, just like the chance to work with Spielberg is a thing. It's he'll be fine. Let's just say that he was probably the primary driver behind this in terms financially. So it's fine, but it is disheartening to see that effect play out for other musicals, upstart musicals. We said this with Scarlett Johansson, where it's like, if Scarlett Johansson can get shafted on her pay, what does that say about the SAG the entry level SAG-AFTRA two-timer that's just trying to get established in the industry? Same thing here.
Of course.
If Spielberg can't, Steven freaking Spielberg, doing everything right, he has a cast of actual Broadway trained actors, people who can dance, people who can actually sing, not just celebrity whatever, and actually give us a freaking Bernstein and Sondheim musical for $100 million. That's actually, if that's the budget for this movie, that's actually a lot less than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was
honestly, yeah. I thought I didn't look up the budget before I saw it. If you had me guess, I would have probably said 175.
Yes, or like 200 million would have been my.
This thing was
guess.
cheaper than I thought it was. This thing was cheaper than I thought. It's cheaper than the BFG even too. I mean, there's not as much motion. There's not like CGI or anything. It's really just scope and actors and whatnot. And a lot of that, I mean, certainly there's intense production values. There's a million extras in the damn thing. But like, it's not. You wouldn't think it was as cheap as it was even still. But it goes to say though, if Spielberg can't make a profitable musical by, like you said, doing everything right, taking a well-known property, a storied property, what does that say then for the future of the theatrical musical? I was disappointed, not shocked, that In the Heights didn't make much money. I wasn't shocked.
For
coupled with the HBO Max it was still the dawn of people leery about, and you could even still say they are going back to the theater in the middle of a pandemic. You could absolutely say that, but I am surprised. I wasn't even shocked too terribly with Dear Evan Hansen, but that was more on reviews and bad press even too. This stunned me.
To establish a baseline, In the Heights, budget $55 million, box office $43.9 billion. Actually, not that bad of a bomb. It was a cheaper budget for something of that scope, and the bomb wasn't that bad. Dear Evan Hansen, actually cheaper, $28 million at the high end, and then box office of $18 million. That's not the biggest deficit in the world.
No, but the expectations for that movie were very high. I don't think Warner had their hugest hopes for In the Heights box office wise, money wise. I think they were hoping to break even on it at the end of the day. Dear Evan Hansen, even I forget was it Fox that put, well, Fox doesn't exist anymore. It couldn't have been Fox. I don't remember who put that out, but I remember the CEO coming out and saying that he was hoping that was going to be one of the bigger movies of the fall, and that was going to leg it to like Thanksgiving even too. So the burden of expectations hurt Evan Hansen more so.
Yeah, and then Tick Tick Boom never got a theatrical release. Technically, a box office of $90,000, probably, in just to qualify for some stuff. But yeah, it's am I missing anything else really in terms of like musicals that aren't made by Illumination or Disney?
No, we're talking clear-cut live-action
exactly.
musicals. No, Tick Tick Boom wouldn't have made money either. Yeah. I mean, even if it was, Tick Tick Boom would have. Tick Tick Boom would have made the least of all four. Quite honestly, too. I mean, look at how Rent did back in the day. Yeah. But like, I don't know what I do not know. And like, even to talking with just people, and I know it's confirmation bias. The people in Steve Pulaski's world do not make up the broader scope of the country. I understand that, but I talk to a lot of people. Old. I have a big circle of people. I don't understand the societal aversion to musicals. I feel like I almost struggle to find people that really enjoy musicals. Now, I don't watch a ton, but I've never had an aversion to them. I almost feel like, if I see like one or two at a time, that's kind of enough. And then I go a little bit and I watch, but I've never had a downright aversion to a musicals. Like, so I feel like that is one of the most maligned genres. Am I wrong to think that, or do you experience that too?
Potentially. My worldview is skewered even more because I did musicals in high school. Those are all my friends.
Yeah, and I
In
have no
college,
background.
in college, art performing arts. So a lot of my friends were musicians and stuff. So they all
Yeah, we
love
went to a performing arts college, really.
Yeah. So it's like if you talk to my friends, you think musicals are the greatest thing on God's green earth. But yeah, overall, I do recognize. I have heard of that trend, and I've heard of that stigma. So we're not really the best people to answer this. My guess is that maybe the music is too. I don't know. I'm kind of pulling this out of my ass. I think the music is not uh, down to earth enough, perhaps. Like it's either like West Side Story is too like I'm just gonna say old or whatever, kind of old music, whereas something like Dear Evan Hansen might be too corny. In the Heights, I don't know. I feel like that's out of everything. In the Heights is probably the most up to date on its aesthetic.
The most modern, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but yeah,
this spells trouble, though. This spells a lot of trouble. I mean, I almost think the saving grace for musicals at this point would be if Trey and Matt were to release another South Park movie, like to theaters, or even I don't even know. I would be hesitant to even say like they'd have to do something like Team America. It would have to be something completely different, out of the ordinary, like something atypical that would almost get people more into the seats. They would be going to see that more than they would be going to see the musical.
If Trey and Matt if they did Cannibal the Musical with a $50 million budget. Did you ever watch Cannibal the Musical?
Yes. Oh, yes.
If they ever did Cannibal the Musical at $50 million, I would camp out of that theater to watch that. I would bring all my friends. I would go all in on that. Now, what they're more likely to do is probably Book of Mormon. Either do that or apparently there's like a filmed version of the original Broadway Book of Mormon that's floating around somewhere. Wouldn't be as good as the Hamilton one because obviously that's they specifically did stuff for that. But I don't know. But yeah, it's just hard to say. You'd have to do like whole sociological like surveys on that stuff. But ultimately, I think it's just because the music is such its own thing. Musicals are its own world, even with very different kinds, like In the Heights versus West Side Story, like Bernstein versus Lin-Manuel Miranda doing rap, right? It's its own world that has this. It's an alluring mystique, but one that is so grand and so legendary and so out there that it might drive people away. You might feel like it's one of those things where the people who might like them get hooked on them, but maybe it's like getting people through that door. Like they need to see one or two to really like, hey, we need to do this again. And so it's like a self-perpetuating thing of like, well, if we're not making that many musicals as a industry, then people aren't going to be able to get accustomed to them and fall in love with them. And then it's like a cycle of whatever. I don't know. I'm sure people have written better things on that, but that's my guess off the cuff.
The final thing I'll add to, and I think this is an important part of the discourse, there's a good box office analyst. I can never pronounce his last name because it's like 25 letters long, but he's a very good analyst. I think it's Paul DeGarbedian, and he said too. He said, and I'll butcher the quote here, but to paraphrase it in a way, he says they're chasing an audience. They meaning the studio. They're chasing an audience that doesn't rush out opening weekend either.
Right.
Like. He goes back and he brought up The Greatest Showman. He said The Greatest Showman was kind of he's like The Greatest Showman was kind of dismissed as a flop when it came out because it only debuted to like 8.5 million or 9 million or somewhere around that range. But that movie had historic legs, and that movie stuck around in theaters for almost as long as Frozen did. That thing stuck in theaters for like 4 months. It was astonishing in a way because it was pretty well reviewed. It was generationally appealing. And I think the reason, though, I would not put that burden of expectation on any movie, quite frankly, because The Greatest Showman is an exception, not the rule, in the way that movie performed and the way that movie's gone on to be revered. But with West Side Story, on the other hand, though, the other part of the problem is that the target demographic for this, there was surprisingly a lot of gray hair in my theater too. Like, just to begin with, I was kind of surprised just by that. But no, here what he's saying though is he's like, the over 40 crowd, the demo numbers for like the over 40 crowd since movie theaters have been have reopened has been very low. So there's still an apprehension of going to the theater from that older crowd, understandably. The 40 and even 50 and 60 plus, who was around growing up when the original West Side Story came out, they're chasing an audience that either waits for like the third or fourth matinee weekend, assuming it gets there, or what they're more liable to do is rent it when it comes out.
It's a cascading effect from the pandemic. We could easily just say that, but people are making less money, less jobs. Apprehension of just the theater in general. People are not going out in general as more. So restaurants, you could lump that in with the theater experience. But on top of all that, it's a whole litany of things. But it still makes both of us worried. I know we want to wrap up, but you made such a great point with The Greatest Showman, where that's like that was a cultural tour de force for a couple years, at least a couple years.
Yeah.
Lasting, I don't think so. And I think that's because I don't think Greatest Showman is that good of a movie. I'm going to say that.
No, I think it's a pretty good movie at the end of the day. I think that movie, it's a great score. It's a great soundtrack. But that movie is seriously flawed in a handful of ways that people kind of brush over.
Yeah.
I love This Is Me as much as the next person. And I still think the best number, and that's The Other Side with Efron and Jackman. But like, that's a movie that you could very easily overlook the flaws because you're so wrapped up in the production and the score. It's not a great movie, though.
I think I always say this. I think people like the idea of The Greatest Showman than actually like living it or like actually watching it. Like, they love the idea of the story, but it's not executed very well. They like the idea that it's a old, classic number kind of song. I don't think the songs are that great in them or that. They all kind of blend together for me, and they're very Dear Evan Hansen. I'll even go so far as to say that the aesthetics of the music in Dear Evan Hansen are more interesting than The Greatest Showman, which is very poppy.
Cap.
That is big cap. That is big cap.
That is a lot of cap.
Right? I will dedicate to that cap.
You are speaking in caps lock. That is ridiculous.
Here's another thing. Here's another thing to the point.
I'll move on from that. I cannot remember a single song from Dear Evan Hansen.
I can think of a few. Greatest Showman, I can't think of a single one, man. It's all this. It all blurs together as the same poppy, whatever the hell. And I like pop, but anyway. To this, I'll say there's a reason why it points in this whole musical, like, our musical's dying. Why don't people like musicals? And why are Disney and Illumination musicals the exception? Animated musicals the exception? It's because those are kids movies, and they are marketed heavily as kids movies, and those bring not only the kids to the theater, they drag their parents in there as well, or rather, their parents they want to shut their kids up for a couple hours and
it's a lot easier. And here's the thing, a lot of even the movies that prominently feature song, it's a lot animated movies rather.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. Again, what am I saying though? It might not be the music that draws them. It's the animation, it's the characters, it's even the plot or the trailer. It's not even always the music. Like, to begin with, it's like Team America World Police. And again, I know that's a bad, seg when we're talking about kids animated movies, but Team America World Police, people were sold on that because it's Trey and Matt, the creators of South Park, and it's marionette puppets. You don't see marionette puppets in movies very often to begin with. So that was a unique sell to begin with. And Matt and Trey can put butts in seats. And then it was like, come for the gimmick, come for the uniqueness, stay for the songs. And the songs just wound up being great, which is really no surprise given, who's writing them. It's
the scene in Team America where they're making fun of Rent.
Yeah.
It's like AIDS, everyone has AIDS. And it's funny because it's like Trey and Matt legitimately do love musicals. They are Broadway stands, 1,000%. So they're loving
Bigger,
making
Longer,
fun of it.
Uncut's a musical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they did Book of Mormon. They have a huge effect. That's one thing I love, and that's another reason I love Seth MacFarlane too, because Seth MacFarlane, he can sing He knows he can sing, but moreover, he can write. He can write, and he can write very well. But that, like I said, we'll see how it legs. I'm curious to see. It's gonna get a lot of theaters stolen though this weekend with Spider-Man. It's gonna get a lot. West Side Story. It's gonna get a lot of theaters stolen. It's losing IMAX. Was it even in IMAX? I don't even know if it was in IMAX or not. West Side Story. I don't know if
know if West Side Story is the kind of IMAX kind of movie you want to see. You would spend the IMAX money to go to it. Between that, I would choose.
Evan Hansen was in IMAX though, I believe
why?
Too. Like,
why bother?
Well, that should have been even in theaters to begin with, but that's beside the point. You know what I mean? That should have been on crankable TV. But anyway, we will leave it at that, though. That's our show, and that's going to be our show now until the 30th of December when we come back and talk about Spider-Man. I keep wanting to say Far From Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Matrix Resurrections. We're going to talk both of those movies next 2 weeks from now. Joe will be back. Fingers crossed. Joe will be back for that, and we'll wrap up the show. And you know, it's crazy. I know we're still 4 months out. We are coming up on 2 years on reviving the show. Believe it or not.
Wow.
Think about it that way. I'll leave you with that thought to chew on. You know, like COVID, you can't get rid of us. Not yet, at least. That's our show, though. Sleepless with Steve. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, except next Wednesday evening, 6:30 p.m. on YouTube. Highlights posted on this YouTube channel later on this week and on stevepulaski.com. You can check out my website. You can see all my reviews on there. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a review of The Murders at Starved Rock, the HBO miniseries. Going to be talking about that. Very, very literally close to home on that one. Reviewing that. South Park. I got to get this title right here. South Park Post-COVID Returns drops on Paramount Plus tomorrow. Be reviewing that. And then Spider-Man No Way Home this weekend. So there's a lot of reviews. And of course, Christmas is coming. So hoping to see Licorice Pizza, American Underdog, the Kurt Warner story, and Don't Look Up. So there's a lot coming out. It's the second big onslaught of movies in 1 week. So I'm doing my best prioritizing what I want. As I almost choked to death. That's God telling me I'm going too long. StevePulaski.com. You can check out those reviews, though. For Dominic Guanzon, Joe Viso in spirit, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.